Return some in boxes, some in skin. Even still alive, they don't come back home again. When soldiers go, some do not come back home. The bodies return, some in boxes, some in skin. Even still alive, they don't come back home again.
Thank you for joining us, everybody. That was Raven Kiefer's new song from his upcoming LP. I encourage you guys to go to at Raven Kiefer on X and keep an eye out for that. He's one of our longtime fans, multi-time guest. So check him out, guys. His music's freaking amazing. So check out his YouTube channel as well. His other albums are up there in addition to that one. So we've got another Sunday Trialogue. If you guys remember, these are my co-hosts, Ricardo and Ethan. Go ahead, guys, and introduce yourselves.
So thank you. Welcome to our third episode of the Trialogues. I hope you have enjoyed the other episode, the previous ones, and excited to do this one. I will pass the word to Ethan.
Honored to be here with you guys. Great to communicate with you as always. And yeah, Ethan Indigo. I'm on all the social media. Easy to find. So I love communicating with people and sharing ideas.
Awesome. Also, published author. Check out his books on Amazon. Look up Ethan
Absolutely.
Indigo's books.
Thanks, Ellis. Thanks, you guys. Yeah, I got a few books online. That one is especially interesting, I like to think.
Well, I guess I'll go first. I think I'm deepening into the madness of my Carthaginian / Canaanite obsession, right? So if you look back at the alphabet, it all comes from Canaanite Phoenician. They call it the Phoenician alphabet to sort of throw you off the scent. But the fact of the matter is that these were the wealthiest people on the planet that made the alphabet. And you just expect them to disappear right about 2,000 years ago? Give me a break. So my theory is that the Invisible Empire started with the Carthaginians, started with the people who were expelled from their homeland in Carthage by the Romans, and they wanted to get revenge. And so they created this underground network to take over all of these different governments. And you can track back all of the different elements of the Carthaginian influence in our society. And when you see the full picture of just how much we've been influenced by them and how much our leadership and our governments around the world resemble their governments and how they ran things, it's really hard to deny that there is a linkage between this whole Illuminati, New World Order stuff and the invisible empire of the Canaanite Phoenicians, which all of a sudden disappeared, even though we know that those people were still around back then. So that's where I'm at. What do you guys think?
How do you put for instance, for us here in Portugal, we are told that our alphabet is a mixture of Latin, but it has some Arabic into it. How would you retrace that to?
Well, I'll show you the Phoenician alphabet, and then I'll show you how it changed over to Greek, and then it changed again over to Latin, but it moved in that progression. And the Hebrew alphabet is just the Phoenician alphabet with a few changes, but they were right on par with each other.
Remind me, and I suppose the folks listening, when was Carthage destroyed? And how direct were they? Canaanites too, or were basically, like, how did that work?
So the Canaanite Phoenician Empire consisted of Tyre, Sidon, Byblos, and Carthage. These were their city-states, right? And so these city-states formed the basis of their empire, and their empire was all of the Mediterranean, all around the rim. They had tiny little outposts everywhere they went, right? So you had settlements in Italy, you had settlements in Crete, you had settlements all over the region, you had settlements in Spain, right? All over Spain, all over Portugal, all over that region. That was all Carthaginian, right? Primarily. Now,
They took it from the Tartessians on the Iberian Peninsula, I think.
so this right here, that's the Phoenician alphabet, right?
Oh, this is the Greek one.
Right. And so the Greeks took what they wanted from the Phoenician alphabet, and then they used it to create their own language of Greek, or their figures for Greek. And then they had three different main dialects that they mostly spoke in. Romans, they're like, well, we got to do something with this stuff, and so they kept that same idea. And this is another reason why you had the Roman numerals being the letters, because for the longest time in history, you didn't have these Arabic numerals. You had letters that you used as numbers. So not only was the Phoenician language the basis for, all of the, language in the world, it was also the basis for all of the mathematics. At the end of the Bronze Age collapse, all of Greece had no written language, right? Originally, they were using linear A and linear B from the predecessor civilization of the Carthaginians and the Phoenicians, which was the Minos, right? The Minoans. And so the Minoans had linear, again, they were the ones who gave the language to the ancient world before the Bronze Age collapse, which made all of Greece illiterate again. They had expended so many resources, gotten into so many wars that they couldn't even read. It wasn't until the Carthaginians and the Canaanite Phoenicians reintroduced language that everything started to get written down again. So there's this big gap in knowledge between the pre-Bronze Age collapse civilizations and what we know of today. But the pre-Bronze Age collapse, that includes both the wars in Turkey against Troy, right? Trojans ended up becoming Romans. And so all of this stuff centers around these neighbors to this group of people that we know today, the Romans and the Greeks. It was all around this Carthage stuff as well. So these Punic Wars were central to understanding the rest of Europe and how they progressed. But we don't really understand those influences because there's nobody around claiming to be Carthaginian today. There's nobody around claiming to be, from this North African empire. We still have people who claim to be Romans. We still have people who claim to be Greeks. But this one just completely disappeared off the map. Nobody even associates that with European civilization anymore. But it's really interesting that you have McCarthy in Ireland, right? Means from Carthage. And you have Cartagena in Spain, which means from Carthage. They have these festivals in Portugal where people are wearing the stone sacrifice masks, right? So they would put masks on their victims in the Carthaginian days and then sacrifice them so that the gods couldn't see them cry. And so as they're doing these...
I have something to build on that, Headless, that you maybe haven't looked at yet, that is really pertinent to the influence, whether you realize it or not, or aware of it or not, because you're speaking their language. Rather, we're using their language. I've been looking into the divine feminine and the prohibition of the divine feminine in correspondence with the prohibition of marijuana. And I don't want to get too deep into it, but because we're going to be, I think you guys are going to be involved. We're going to be doing a show on it, and I don't want to repeat myself too much, but bug out on this. One of the main Canaanite goddesses, who is related to Tanit, but not Tanit, more than likely, a lot of the relationships of the people and the gods are really confused by time, and as you point out, likely people hiding certain things because of prohibition of these ideas, innocent or otherwise. There was a Shira, who was the goddess, who is the wife of Yahweh. And I won't get too deep into that because I'm going to talk on it. But guess what she birthed?
What's that?
70 gods. She's the mother of 70 Canaanite gods. And this harkens back to the creation, for me, as whenever I see that number. In the Bible, you see it in reference to the 70 nations. Every nation has a god. Sometimes it's 70, sometimes it's 72. Just like the Septuagint, the first Bible. The title of the first Bible is the 70. And so when this came out, it would have been obvious to anyone who knew anything about anyone in the Mediterranean that the 70 meant the 70 gods, and 70 or 72, because there's Yahweh and Asherah and the 70 other gods that she birthed. And so if you look at the reasoning for the title 70, I at one point thought it was about the number of books in the book, but it's not. It was supposedly referencing the number of Hebrew scholars that participated in the Greek translation. But I feel like 70 had a much more reckoning in that time period to these 70 gods of the Mediterranean world, if you will. And the mishmash, I think we can't even, it's hard for us to understand how
Letters were
mishmash
numbers.
is.
Letters were numbers back then. Remember that. Letters were numbers back then. So they had a completely different way of seeing the world that we don't really share with them today, which is that everything they were looking at were also numbers. And this is where you get isopsephy and all this stuff having to do with the numbers in the words, all the gematria. It comes from that time period. So everything in that Bible is coded. It's all coded. There's something else going
And to
on
your
here.
point about controlling the language by them just being the creators thereof, now they kind of started a new era with that new way of thinking. The monotheistic thing was like, a real compelling change, a forced change. And so that they kind of prescribed the grammar in that respect too. To your
They
point.
forced the change after taking over. They used every ancestral memory they could get their hands off from that region, packed it all into the book so that the people listening to this Bible would hear things from their own, genetic memory from all of these stories that they shared with them. They had stories from the Greek, they had stories from the Ugarit, they had stories from Rome. All of that stuff was packed into the Bible. And so as people are reading it, they see stuff from their own lineage and they're like, wow, this must be onto something. So it's just this mishmash of identities that came together because they were trying to centralize the belief system.
So, and about those 70, do you see them expanding over the globe or just in the area of the Mediterranean?
I see that just as an idea more than this happening. I don't know. I'm not saying that it's an exoteric idea, more that it's an esoteric idea related to the creation of the first Bible. In the 70 and 72 of the Yahweh and Asherah pairing and their 70 offspring. Just an idea going to the first Bible being called the 70 and sometimes the 72, which is just a weird correspondence. That it's just an ideation, that it's really a similarity. I don't know that there were 70 beings whatsoever at all.
Yeah, I was more connecting to what Headless has said, this moving underground. I was seeing 70 heads of families to take 70 different territories and install their power. That's how I was reading it.
I'm sure that
everything is symbolic for these people, so I don't know.
Right. Well, I'm sure that people act on it and will just say that number, even if it's 32. They'll say 70, or if they'll say 33, whatever. The number is meaningless. They'll associate with that kind of symbolism, I think.
This is why I think Noah's Ark plays such a pivotal role in their mythology, is because that Noah's Ark myth gives them access to all the other peoples in the world, because they had to descend from these sons of Noah, right? So now they sort of have a generalized rule of who goes where and what they're doing, right? So they've got this idea that everybody came from this one source after the great flood. You remember that great flood that happened in your mythology? Well, we have it too, right? We just know who it was and where people went after that. So it was like answering your question. They have Deucalion's flood in the Greek mythology. You've got, all the way back to the Sumerians. They've got these flood myths over and over again. So they use that as a form of cultural memory to get everybody into the idea that they're the first book. And then later on, after they made it mandatory, they're like, you must believe this. And so since then, all of our sort of genetic memory and all of this stuff has been funneled through this book. And you find epithets from the Baal cycle in Ugarit, which was, 1,000 years before any Bible was written. And the Bible directly rips off the epithets for Baal for the Proverbs. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to force everybody into thinking inside of this book, and it worked. It covered the whole planet just by using these simple psychological tricks.
So would you think that exactly as we were talking before we coming live, of those few that had the knowledge? So let's follow Sir Conan Doyle and say that once we eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, no matter how improbable, must be the truth. So if these people were actually capable of seeing this bolide that was coming towards the Earth to cause the Burkle crater and all the two impacts in the Pacific and one in the Atlantic that caused the event that is called the Great Deluge or whatever. So my point is, if they were in fact able not only to detect the object, but to calculate more or less his trajectory, they could have this few saying the end is coming, join us. And after the end did came, those would be figures of power because they knew something that no one else knew. They have some connection that is implied to be to a god. Right?
Do you remember in that last one, you remember the symbol of Tanit I was showing you that had the circle with the triangle?
Yeah.
Well, this is Gloria Vanderbilt. This is Anderson Cooper's mom. That's Anderson Cooper and his brother on the bed. This is from a Time magazine article. Right there, you see Tanit featured prominently in that sort of display behind her. And if you look, what's inside that box right there is a human being on fire being sacrificed, just like they used to do it in the Carthaginian days.
Which seems very proper to kids' room.
Yeah, very proper. But you see what I'm kind of pointing at here? Like there's this undercurrent of people who are directly involved with the worship of these old gods, directly linked to all of these huge world fortunes. And somehow they were around before the Bible was even written.
I was going to say they're in our Bible now, right? These gods are just in our, in different formation in the Bible that we think is one
right.
thing.
But I think it's pretty clear though that something odd is happening in this regards, because that's a pretty huge coincidence. But there's an even bigger one, and it directly relates back to this god Tanit again. Let me see how this. Yeah, here we go. This is the Pope and Zelensky plotting out their next move with that same goddess of Tanit right there. Kind of evolved a little bit, but you can see it's still a prominent feature within Catholicism, and probably has a lot to do with Catholicism if we're being honest. And there's something about this human sacrifice ritual that they really get off on. And you can see that happening over and over again in different forms. You got abortion. You've got all these other ways that you could have these child sacrifices. And what do we look at in our society today but the same kind of stuff?
Well, I've been saying for many years that when we see, I'm not sure if I should say this online, but when we see all these funny faces going to Africa to help the little kids, we don't see those planes being filled with children and brought back, and no one knows what happens to those children. Right? So I think that they saw that what Diana was doing got public's attention. It even could move money, and so they started hiring after her. Started hiring these people like Jolies and Bonos and all of these people to go there.
We got to get closer to home first. We got to talk about the Marc Dutroux affair in Belgium. That was the Epstein of its time. Marc Dutroux was this horrendous, vicious pedophile that had multiple girls locked up in his basement. And those girls started implicating well-known political figures in the Belgian government. So Marc Dutroux kept getting off and not getting any charges filed until the entire country went on strike. And they went on strike to make sure that Marc Dutroux finally went to jail. And they finally put him in jail, but he still didn't talk, and none of his clients were ever questioned. And this was the Epstein before Epstein. If anybody hasn't heard of it, look up the Marc Dutroux affair. It's directly linking to this Mothers of Darkness castle, also in Belgium, which has to do with a lot of this satanic New World Order garbage. But I think it's not satanic, it's Carthage. Because what you do is you have to control both the good and the evil in society. This is how you keep things moving forward. You get people pissed off at the evil, and then you channel that energy into whatever you want them to go to war against.
Look, this is exactly as Richard Hoagland said many years ago. That is, he said the lie is different at every level, and I like to say the truth is different at every level, because if you go even to these lodges or whatever, you see that there is, as soon as you go forward, you understand new meanings to the same things that they already taught you. So it's all layered. It's just it's full. It doesn't have just one meaning. It has lots of meanings that then culminate in the source, or what they believe is the source when you reach the top. That allows you to see the whole program. It's like climbing to the pyramid. You are going to see more and more ground as you go up.
And I don't think that these, whatever, if you will, satanic groups are necessarily in one stream. Like perhaps there are many that are in this Carthaginian idea that you put forth, but I think that there's many different groups of evil, and some of them probably don't associate with each other.
I got another source for you. This is the secret history inside the court of Justinian and Theodora, which is all about this Eastern Orthodox Roman emperor who reinvades Rome and takes it away from the Goths and the Visigoths. Well, he also had some weird experiences having to do with his wife, who was from Byblos, right? One of these Carthaginian cities. And she was a temple, well, I guess her family went from being a temple prostitute to just being a straight up prostitute, because they used to have a temple prostitution program, but then that had to just transfer over to the theater after Christians took over. They didn't really get rid of it.
I would point out that from research that I've been doing, that there originally those temple prostitutes were temple priestesses, and when monotheism came in, they made it so that anything having to do with the feminine being oriented in a leadership role or some form of authority was made a whore. They literally forced the same people or made the job that was formerly priestess, this next generation was a prostitute. Just that it was forced institutionalization.
Lots and lots of pimps went into Christianity. And if you look up the original story of St. Nicholas, he was getting ready to pimp out his daughters. That was early Christianity. So Theodora, this whore, she would wait outside of the theater to pick up men afterwards. Well, she became the wife of this Emperor Justinian, right? And so she was a vicious sadist. She loved to torture men to death, and she also got, to be the, saint in the Catholic or the Orthodox Church because she was the first woman emperor of the Eastern Empire. So she was pretty important, but she was also a big iconoclast. Her big thing was going around smashing idols. So she did that a lot too. She liked to torture men and smash idols, and the Christians gave her sainthood. She's still a saint to the feminists today. She's actually talked a lot about in their literature. They love Theodora, and all of the feminist literature. That's their saint too. So it's not just Christianity.
I would propose, I don't know if with certainty all, right? Like we never want to be absolute, as I think Ricardo was saying the other day. But a lot of the destruction of those pillars in that time period, or those statues, were of Asherah, sometimes Baal, in relation to her too. They had related, but Asherah being I think of her as the contrast to Yahweh, which was a total storm god of destruction, which
they had to completely erase their culture because Rome had it out for them. They
Yep.
had just destroyed all of Carthage.
Feminine it was a real stickler. Because I was going to say it was very. Go ahead. I can remember.
Rome and Greece had both outlawed human sacrifices 1,000 years before they were forced to stop doing it in Carthage when the Romans finally came in. So the Romans kept talking about in their Senate that these people won't stop sacrificing children, and they also said, in Carthage, what they would do is they would pay the poor people to take their children to sacrifice. And part of the ritual was putting these masks on the children that had these big smiling faces like you see with the theater. The smiley mask and the frowny mask, that's sort of the idea going on here. But they would throw them into these fires, and they were all supposed to play instruments so that the gods couldn't hear them screaming and the gods couldn't see them crying. And if Ricardo, you got any pictures from that parade you were showing me?
The parade?
Yeah, the parade where they're all wearing those exact same stone masks. I have a few of the other masks, the ones that the Carthaginians used.
Oh, I have to look.
I would
just compare the two.
It was very in vogue to have storm gods as the god back then, because that's what they were warring amongst each other. That's a big part of why we have this, unknown aspects of history. So the storm god Yahweh was like a pretty typical at that point in time. And I think now we have this monotheism that is based on a destructive war god. So how is our morality transformed into modernity? I don't know, but we certainly are lacking a consideration of being a positive generation rather than a destructive generation.
Oh yeah, I completely believe you. I think that the Carthaginians, they weren't just the traders of the entire Mediterranean region. They were also the traders of culture. So when you see all of these different ancient polytheistic religions having a certain aspect that they share in common with all of them, you got to ask yourself, who is the one trading between all these different countries? And to me, I think it's pretty clear that they were the ones trading. They were the ones spreading the culture even back before Christianity. I don't understand why that wouldn't be taking place back then too, because it wasn't just the storm god in Carthage. It was also the storm god in Greece. It was also the storm god in Rome, and all these other places shared a similar high storm god, and it all went along with this astrotheology stuff. So it's like, oh, also the North Star in Greece was called the Phoenician star because they were the sailors.
Set was the original, or one of the original storm gods of chaos and destruction, and he in a lot of ways, was not only that, but he embodied other things too, or even positive and negative. But did you know what his face is? What his head is?
What is it? Oh, the
A
donkey.
a donkey. And
Hmm.
did you know what Yahweh was originally presented as?
A donkey.
No.
Yes, sir. That's right. And so a part of this was the warring cultural war, if you will, and also probably in engagement too, in different ways, economic and militaristic and otherwise, that was going on with the Jews and the Egyptians, right?
Right.
Or the Jews broadly, because they were so loosely, they weren't even in a conformist state of the Jews that we would understand them now. But the creation of Yahweh was to basically say, oh, you think that the storm god messed up your main god in the stories, right? The main story in the Egyptian pantheon has Horus, is it Osiris is tricked by Set, right? And so the Jews used that god as their design to be their god because, hey, F you Egyptians. And
Well,
I mean,
you know what's funny about that? You know what's
Bible
funny
is-
about that? The Elephantine Jews lived in Egypt and had absolutely no problem with the
Oh yeah.
Egyptian
There were
government
Jews
at all.
all over. Yeah,
Right.
yeah, they were
And
all over. Yeah.
I think somebody with a much deeper standing grudge, like the Phoenicians, would
Until
probably.
I think it's the monotheism kicked in, because
Well,
that's when like the Exodus story, like Elephantine Island, they had wherever they went, they dipped out, and there was surely that was just a one place where they're probably all over, right, or relatively north anyway.
right.
So I think it is interesting. I think the monotheism kicked in, and then everyone went even more nuts. That they were nuts before, but
I think one of the things that people don't note, either when they see an old movie or Charlton Heston movie, or read the actual Bible about this episode, is that, for instance, when Moses goes there, and
It won't let me open it, but here's one of the masks of the
I've shown,
Carthaginians.
didn't you saw them? I showed them. I shared them. You saw?
I know
Yeah.
this is the ancient
Oh.
one. This is the
Yeah,
ancient
yeah.
mask from the Carthaginians, and they're
Yeah,
doing the
I've seen
same
like that.
exact thing.
Yeah, I've seen the same thing exactly.
I mean, they've got a whole festival where they're still engaging in the ancient rites of human sacrifice. That's amazing to me. How is there that continuity?
Changing the context of the public notion. What I'm saying is, when Moses, for instance, sends his stick to the ground and it transforms into a snake, if you remember by the scripture, the Egyptian magicians did exactly the same thing. The only difference is the snake that came from the stick of Moses ate the other two snakes, but the magic was equal. It just depends. One was stronger or knew better tricks, like the trick of the red waters or the frogs and all of that stuff. The others didn't know how to do, and he knew it. So in the end, I can see it both as divine and as knowledge, as some form of practitioner that could invoke such events. So it's what I mean is, it's not unique. What is presented and teach it today as something that was unique to Yahweh and to the God of Moses, it wasn't unique. The others could do it too. They just knew it a little bit less than Moses was taught somewhere. And
I
the
have a
last thing,
proposition.
let me just say this, because it's from back of the conversation, and it's probably out of context now. But for those that wish to understand the real difference between what is presumed as a satanic ritual or something of that sort and a real thing, is that, as you can see in The Ninth Gate, a movie that I recommend for you to see, there are two types of occultists. There are those that are there because it's fun, it's prestigious, he has the parties, he has the sex, he has all of those things, and it's good to feel bad and all of that stuff, but they don't understand any of what is really on scripture or to be done, or rituals or whatever. And then there's the other side that actually is actively working with this kind of magic to produce actual results. So I just wanted to make that difference. So you can see that on the ninth gate for those that didn't see it.
Absolutely. And I had a friend of mine from England talking about the black and the white squares inside of the cathedrals, or the lodges, right? So let's say that this is a hypothetical. You're going to one of these initiations and you're presented with the baby. And if you punch the baby, they have a certain department for you. And if you punch the guy who's holding the baby, they got another department for you. But what they do know is that they will have control over you no matter where you are. So it doesn't matter if you're a good person or a bad person. They can always turn you from whatever they need.
Yeah, you were there. You were there.
So I think that goes into process theology. So the process church at the final judgment is all about having Lucifer and Satan and God and Jesus as these four deities. And so what they do is they combine the pantheon, and they're going out and making the public think that they're these good guys, when in reality they're behind some of the biggest mass murderers in America, because they're creating chaos to empower the state, empower the God, you know? And so the idea there is that maybe all of this antinomianism that we see pervading the church, maybe that's intentional. Maybe Satan really is part of the pantheon, and he always has been, and they create social chaos to try to induce people back into the flock. You know, they're trying to pull people back in, so they've got to go over the top with the amount of violence and chaos and all the rest of the shit we see in the world, so that our one God is the state.
Well, there are many people that believe, when I say many, but there are people that believe that even the very terror movie industry, for instance, that they use this to go to these theaters and absorb that energy that people produce when they are frightened by what they are seeing. Maybe I'm going too far for people to follow, but they I don't think that they want to convert us. That's what I mean. I think that they want to extract from us whatever they are extracting from us, be it
Right.
labor, be it money, be it organs, be it adrenochromes, be it whatever. But I don't believe that they want us to all convert to their to their religion, because it's a religion of control and not a religion of the masses, I think.
Well, the museum, Altar of Peace Museum, I believe is the Process Church Museum that they have in Vatican City. It seems pretty obvious. I mean, they've got a Process Church Museum in Vatican City. So their whole thing is antinomianism. Like, you've got to have the antinomianism to push the agenda forward.
And how about those that say that the Vatican is ruled not by the white pope, but by the black pope, that is a Jesuit?
It's the same thing. Both sides are controlled. There's no difference.
Yeah, but again, there's the non-seen part. That's what I'm talking about.
Right.
There's a visible area that we see, and then there's these people that are behind controlling that.
Right. And I mean, it doesn't matter how obvious they make it, as long as we have this dichotomy in our heads that somehow some of these groups are good and somehow some of them are evil, and not actually looking at them as having these interests that align and allow them to, rule things from the shadows. It's like, you just have to be a little bit smarter than the play they put on for you. The entire point of this is theater, and we've all been tricked by theater. That's really what we're looking at. I mean,
could that be a reason why they stopped dressing the Pope as Nimrod?
People were catching on
with that weird.
See, that's the thing. Those are the ancestral memories. That's all in your blood. That's what they've been using against us this whole time, is they take all of this ancient ancestral memory and they put it back on display for you, and you think it's all the rest of those things combined. That's why it's called the Catholic Church, or universal. They're taking those ancestral memories and shoving them back at you.
Well, they've been reconfiguring ancient sites into new ones since the beginning, so I don't doubt it.
Right? It's a genius play, but I don't think it's that new. It sounds like a very old strategy to me.
Oh, yeah. Very old. Very old. And if you see these people like Michael Tsarian or or even David Icke in this respect, when you go to genealogy and be following how these families go back in time, they are the few families in the world that you can actually go back that much in time, because you don't have records for the regular guy. I can't go further than 2 or 3 generations back. And I'm in Portugal. We have records for 1,200 years of genealogy in our towers. We have a place where it's all kept. But us, without doing the consultation, we don't know. We just don't know. And
Right.
they know everything, and they know way back where it goes.
Yeah, that's my presentation. I'm taking up a lot of time.
No,
Who,
you know.
Ricardo,
who
you
is for
go.
next?
I'll go last.
Okay, so what I propose today for us to discuss is the fact that all points out that this biosuit that we use doesn't can what I mean is our connection, our real self connection, our interface with this body can change what we think the body is. Okay, so this can have multiple thing applications as placebo effects in healing, because as long as we believe that is happening, it happens. So we have the ability to regenerate by ourselves by the simple belief, unquestionable belief. It's even not conscience. It's just something that it is, which is hard. It's like faith. It's something to understand. And what I'm about to show is a video that I'm going to try and describe while I show it. So I'll share the screen. I want to share this one. Share. Okay, so what's going on here is this fellow is given a rubber arm, going to be pretending his arm. And you can see that he doesn't see his own arm behind that panel, right? So what this procedure does, and this, I'm going to cut this out. So what this procedure does is he's going to start touching. I'm going to move a little bit forward. You see, he's touching the fake arm exactly as he's touching the real arm, right? And so what is really happening is the brain is immediately rewiring himself to accept that new arm, that it's not part of the body. So at some point, he's going to stop doing. He's already feeling the rubber arm. Did you see his face? So at some point, the guy is only going to start doing on the rubber arm, and he's still feeling. Let me move a little bit forward. He's now not touching. See, he put it onto the side. He's not touching the real hand, and the guy is feeling it. And this happens to every single test subject that has done this. You see, this body is completely convinced that the rubber arm is his. He has sensor nerves. He can feel the touch, everything. So what I'm proposing for us to discuss, let me move this a little bit forward, because he's going to bring a hammer. And look, he's pinching himself and believing that's the hand, right? And let's see. Come on, you're teasing too much. Jesus, can you just hit the man? He's already in pain. He hasn't felt anything yet. You see the other fingers moving? Now let me move to the end. See the other hand. Wait, I moved too fast. There you go. You see the shock Okay, gonna stop the sharing. Go back to you guys.
Right. There's a phantom limb association, right? And if we extrapolate that out further, we find that it's the things that we convince ourselves we're seeing that sort of trap ourselves in the body.
That makes it real. So what else are we believing as real that isn't?
Exactly. I think there is something to that.
And you think that if consciousness was in the brain, that the brain could do that?
Right.
If it is a closed system.
I'd have to experience it myself to really.
Well, every
really
single subject. I'm not aware of a single person that has gone through this test and didn't felt that the rubber arm was his.
I just find it hard. I just think I would not do that. But I mean, if everyone does it, maybe I would, I guess. But I just would have to experience it.
Look, I would put it in the class of hypnotism. That is, as far as I know, I cannot be hypnotized, but I probably didn't find the right guy to do it, or probably I do not submit myself to do it, or probably I'll go into this test and already saying to my body, look, don't believe this guy, your arm is behind that. Because if you remember, the first thing he tells to the guy is, I want you to believe that this arm is yours. It's not a random thing that people get. He's actually telling them, from this point on, I want you to think that this is your arm. And you focus on that arm, that it's not his. The fact is, how are you feeling exactly where you're being touched if there are no nervous system attached?
Well, let me ask this question. What happens when that brings into question a lot of fundamental emotions? Like, what if love is just a illusion that we convince ourselves into? What if happiness is all illusory, and we have to have the illusion before we can even feel happiness?
And that leads us again to what will be another conversation, that is determinism versus free will.
Right.
How is that we are so certain that we are in control of our lives? Because we might not be.
I think the more I understand how out of control everything is and how ill, then I start to be able to mediate control in my life and my perimeter. But that's about it. Everything is very much out of our control. It does come apparent. But I think we've talked about this before. Essentially, if not specifically, our senses are limited because we would be overwhelmed with so much input that we wouldn't be functional human beings, even in a primal sense, let alone how elitists try to make tools of ignorant people. Right. So we would have to really tone it down. And our brains did. Our brains kind of, allowed us to really, we can obsess on like one and two. We can multitask, but like we can really do like one thing at a time, like time to go hunting. Okay, that's what we're doing, and we're not efficient beings as we think we are. We're decent, but.
Well, those that manage to explore the abilities or are taught to do so, they can go beyond that limitation. So we start from the principle that we are all able to do that. The problem is it's not something that it's obvious or that we are mentalized in our growth that is possible to do. Most people listen, do one thing at a time. You're going to do mistakes. Do one thing at a time. And people focus on that procedure, right? So I think it's all a matter, the limits of the human abilities are everything but explored.
Yeah, I think what you're saying there is that there's a linkage between our perceptions and how much we're able to achieve in you know the grand scheme of things. So if your perception is limited in some way, that makes you more deterministic than if you have a wider perspective and you can see further down the road. You're a lot less deterministic in some ways.
Sure. And those that are completely against that will tell you that, yeah, you get out of the first cave and you think you're free, but you're on the second one. So what's the wrong with being in the first one? No matter how many caves you get out, you'll still be in one cave. But I disagree. I think that I will try to get out as many caves as I can. As long as there is a cave, I want to get out of it. So,
Right.
right. So I may fail because it might be infinite number of caves, but
Well, how many
I
do
will
we
keep
make
trying.
ourselves? How many caverns do we make as we are exiting? We make another.
It was you who told me that, right? I was trying to figure out who told
I'm
me.
not. Are you accusing me of repeating myself? I probably did.
No. What I said. I heard it from on one of the shows with you guys.
Yeah, no.
About when you leave the cave, you are inside another cave. It was the first time that I heard it.
I definitely think that. Yeah.
Well, I have a scary thought. So we're talking about what do we know if we're being controlled or not? What if, since the whole shift over to the Abrahamic faiths, there was a shift towards whatever inspired this work? I don't believe it was truly even mostly human. I think there was something else behind it. And if you go back into the book of Judges and the book of Kings, they talk about the Ark of the Covenant. And this thing was it was guided by a cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. And this box would speak to the priests through this mineral display that they had on their chest that would light up in different combinations with whatever this entity wanted to, put out as a message. And so you've got a cloud in a box and a light up mineral display.
Crystals that glow, yeah.
Crystals that glow. Weird. And so we're talking about some sort of like interdimensional intelligence that's sort of assembling itself.
Or
and we're becoming more transhuman as it comes along. And we're deeper into this whole smoky mirror, right? This is our divination device. The smoky mirror is a Tezcatlipoca. It's another dark entity from the New World that seems to be integrated into our lives alongside all of these other deities. And so the old world evil, new world evil coming together to, have babies. And so what do we look at? It's like this is the fear propaganda matrix that we're sort of in. It's like the Ahriman concept that comes from, what was his name? Who talked about Ahriman? He was a mystic from Europe. I forgot. Anyways.
I only know Nassim Haramein, and he's a physicist. So, no.
Oh, okay. No, this was the, he started anthroposophy. Do you remember that one?
No, that's a funny name.
Yeah, anthroposophy. Let me look him up. But he's a real
Steiner?
Steiner, there we go. Yeah, so Steiner talked about this deity called Ahriman, which, is like this combination of artificial intelligence and this, abstract mind of a machine, right? And so if that's a constant throughout human history and it's not just a recent development, what is it trying to morph us into? What's it trying to push us towards, because it probably doesn't exist yet. It exists as a concept or a theory, but that is creating this sort of wave throughout the past to try and see if it will come to exist.
Let me go to the virtually impossible. Imagine that you are the civilization that you are describing at the beginning of our conversation, and that you find in some cave, in some hypogeum, a machine that is made of crystals or whatever that can retain information and even put an image or something, a hologram or whatever that has that information. So you go there and you ask, guy gains courage and asks something like, how do I do this? and the guy and the machine goes to the records that is on this crystal and say, oh, you do this and this and this. And so you start knowing things that you don't. And how about astronomy? How about history? How about sacred geometry? How about this, that, and that? And the machine knows everything because it's been a record of all the things. So you have that power. And
it's a tutelary spirit. It's the literal definition of a tutelary spirit.
Sure. So it doesn't need to be a god or an entity. It can be something much that was trivial to a past civilization, right? And it's by miracle remain intact. For instance, well, if it exists, it should be in the Vatican by now on the vault, but maybe not. What about those Indian temples that the government doesn't allow anyone to open the door?
Right.
What's inside that stuff?
There's so much power in the past that we're missing out on that I think that people pass over because they don't necessarily think it has any application in their own lives. But I think what you're doing, Ricardo, with that research is so vital based off of the fact that it could be liberating to the human species.
Yeah, I think that if the world is coming to an end of a cycle, I think that the answer lies in the rebuild or the reactivation of these ancient sites in order to produce some protection. That's what I think. It's far-fetched, but I think that they used it in the past and they are still here, and they might be 130,000 years old, so, or even more. So, and they have functionality. That's undeniable. Even if we remove all the fantastic as the portals and this and that, we still have the psychological effects that are more than real and tested and proven. And we are replicating that in labs, acoustic labs, and seeing the same results. So
I look at it like this. So humans, once they start to get the hang of something and they can start to practice at it and they get better at it and better at it and better at it, we see the exponential growth curve. We haven't even started the exponential growth curve of understanding this type of hidden ancient technology. If that is the opening that we need to start understanding this stuff at a much deeper level, that's what it takes. You know, we got to crack that door and start moving into the different realms that we've been denied, right? So yeah, Ahriman as a quintessential deceiver egregore gives him strong Enneagram 3 topology. 3 are vainglorious achievers with remedial value of candor and authenticity. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, if we look into the
AI slop.
if we start messing with the same type of technology that I believe the ancients used, that have nothing to do with how we see technology. In fact, I think that the way we are shown technology is very much to turn us to a completely different side of what was.
Right?
And they don't hide the rest because, well, who's going to a stone building and start doing a ritual inside or playing music? Who's going to do that? No one's going to do that. And besides, after you understand the technology, you can replicate it anywhere else.
If you try to, 300 years ago, they'd burn you at the stake.
Exactly. Because you cannot
That's
own
not
the
an
knowledge.
accident.
You cannot own the knowledge.
That's not well. They had it. They're keeping it. It's not for you.
Yeah, but then they have the help of the people because we still love the Colosseum. People still love the Colosseum. No, yeah, Ethan, they do. People love to see.
I'm only
People
laughing.
go to.
It's dark humor. I'm not laughing at it falsehood. No.
People go to races to see accidents. People go to a box fight to see people get really smacked. The real emotion of any sport is the fact that it can have some kind of aggression or some kind of a fight, or that's what exhilarates people. In fact, if there isn't a fight, they make a fight on the crowd, as you've seen in football all over Europe. They have to go police. What kind of a sport needs for people to get police escorts to their seats because they cannot mingle with one another? Because if they mingle with one another, they're going to start smashing each one's faces. It doesn't make any sense. These
I think
people still love the Colosseum. They still love to kill, kill, kill. They still love it.
I think that can be used. I think it can be used because let's face it, if we start seeing inventors and people coming out there with really like valuable answers to questions that we've had for a long time, and they start smashing back at the establishment, you could get that kind of energy, that Coliseum energy on the side of, the good people, want to create these things and create more freedom. And I start to see that wave build up, and then we've got another distraction, but I think people can be motivated in that direction using different marketing tactics. That's what I think is going to push this stuff to the next level. Is all you got to do is get enough people involved, and the right person who's actually dedicated, has that authenticity. We're going to see big changes in that regards.
I think it's if it comes to fruition, it would cause a rift on society. Instead of a evolution of society, we call a rift, and people would follow to one side, and most of the people will still wish to remain in what they call the safe side. Here is safe because we have institutions holding over us. We have healthcare, so it's the safe side. People don't like change, even if it is for their own good. They don't like it.
There was this guy who had an agorism website about doing this sort of like caravan living in Europe. And so basically what they would try to do is they would have these RVs, and then they'd set up a village, and then they'd get that village wired with a bunch of Bitcoin miners, and they would actually be making a massive amount of profit just by traveling around, and they didn't have to pay any taxes, and they were able to have nice things. I don't know if that's going to be possible in the near future, but they're making sort of like autonomous city states as they go, which, if you're talking about industry, you've got a vast potential just existing on the internet, having these, little villages that travel wherever they need to be to make the maximum profit.
If you have today, it must be about $3 to $5 million. You can buy a country. It's not a country as people are used to see on the map, but there are places on the world still for sale that can be considered autonomous. So there is this ancient Second World War base in the middle of the ocean, for instance, that is for sale for ridiculous low amount of money, considered if it was something else. You have a guy that actually constituted a country on abandoned oil extraction in the ocean. So he has 200 people living there, and he's the king or something like that. It's not a cult. It's just people that want to completely live off the grid. So he bought that, and he sold a bunch of accommodations, and they are the subject of the kingdom. So it is still possible, but it is always the same thing. You need a lot of money to achieve something like that.
Yeah, no doubt. I think the whole idea of having a private country is what attracted the elites down to the Caribbean area anyway, because you've got Maxwell down there looking into submarines and building cities that are in the ocean. You've got Epstein with his island, and there's another one, Big St. James Island. Nobody wants to talk about that one, but as you've noticed, like all of these law of the sea types are attracted to off the grid places in the ocean, and that shouldn't be ignored.
I would suggest too that the South African contingent of technocrats really want to make their own nation, however they can. Which, if we've reached a good point to make my presentation, I have a great idea that builds on everything we've been discussing.
Oh, it's a shame we end of time.
We went 3 hours last time, right? We got another half. No, I just mean if you were done. Ricardo.
Sure, absolutely. Go on.
So Hegel is often talked about online for his problem reaction solution, if you will. And I have a neat idea related to that builds on that. But I wanted to talk about a different idea of Hegel's. from the phenomenology of spirit called the Lord. Excuse me. The what is it? I call it the master and slave dialectic, and it is more specifically called the Lord and bondsman dialectic. But we don't really use those words anymore, but an interesting kind of dynamic going on. And in fact, he uses many different historical events to explain the master slave dynamic. That unfolds all throughout history whenever two cultures meet. This is his terminology originally, that is now been repeated a lot in politics and just sci-fi even. But even with Carthage and Rome, like there's two different cultures. The stronger, something's got to give, and one of them's gonna go by the way, is the normal outcome. He actually posited a few different potentials. The master meets the slave, or rather, the stronger meets the weaker, and there is basically an enslavement of the weaker society by the stronger society. And
the weak are meat, and the strong do eat.
And essentially, he's boiling it down into very basic terms. But I think there are esoteric lessons in it. So we'll just get through the exoteric sludge. But the slave eventually is going to fight back, right? And when that occurs, well, one or the other may very well die, right? As in war, one culture loses. It happens. But there may be this outcome where the master cannot beat the slave, and he recognizes the slave as an equal consciousness to his own, and realizes that he has his own set of understandings, wants, desires, and
rights, and so on.
The masters and slave, they both are their own individuals from then on. Hegel uses different historical events for that, like I said. But again, the American Civil War, even the events in Russia attacking Ukraine, right? The bigger country is going to enslave the smaller country. The stronger is going to enslave the weaker. And what's going to happen? We don't know. But eventually, we hope they both might recognize each other as individual consciousness. That's the best outcome, I guess, right? But it's just this theory has gone on to really, actually, speaking of Russia, inspire a lot of different politics, I said, and Marx particularly, in his idea with eventually there's going to be, his idea put the master-slave context into the bourgeois and the have-nots, right? So eventually the have-nots are going to fight the haves, and society will then go from capitalism to socialism to communism, was his prediction thereof. But the parallels of the eventuality of the weaker fighting the stronger is there. And so we could say Hegel really foundational influence on Marx even. I wanted to read one little excerpt, not from Hegel, because every understanding of Hegel is a misunderstanding of Hegel. And I say that as someone who has attempted to read his books. They're translations of, hundreds of year old German. So it's really, really difficult. But the essential idea is important in the master-slave dialectic, that is not necessarily referenced overtly as much. And I think the most important part is, the recognition of other consciousness. But I wanted to read the complete excerpt, or a larger excerpt of the Lord Acton letter, where we famously extract the absolute power corrupts absolutely idea. I cannot accept your canon that we are to judge Pope and King, unlike other men, with a favorable presumption that they did no wrong. If there is any presumption, it is the other way, against holders of power, increasing as the power increases. Historic responsibility has to make up for the want of legal responsibility. Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Great men are almost always bad men, even when they exercise influence and not authority. Still more when you superadd the tendency or the certainty of corruption by authority. There is no worse hearsay than that the office sanctifies the holder of it. So I just wanted to apply that to just thinking about the master-slave dialectic. The world history is really one of institutions and individuals, as we discuss these global issues and control propaganda or systems of pattern making. Maybe propaganda is a bad way to put it, but it's really interaction of institutions and individuals. And the more we understand that we should, look for institutions to give us the respect of conscious beings, and we should give them the respect of logos, of whatever. They're nothing. So a lot of times today, I feel like people give consciousness to corporations, and to government is certainly a famous one. And the Soviet Union, maybe we can, by time and because of distance, we can look at it and realize how much they really adopted the monotheistic mindset into the Godhead, right? For a while there really, religion was kind of overtly repressed, and the Godhead idea was really put forth in art, politics, all kinds of ideas. And we're not separate from that. We're not necessarily, we are susceptible to that influence too, as Americans. I'm just saying that, and Europeans and so forth, anyone, that I'm just saying that we can see it happening there by separation of distance and time. So I thought that really, as you guys were presenting your ideas, I was like, oh, this is really a great context for just looking at that lord and bondsman idea, or master and slave dialectic. So
I think it's interesting that we're in the age of Pisces, and it's two fish chained together. The old master and slave mentality right there. Fish guiding the fish.
And
right. Yeah, and the master realizes that, oh my gosh, I've been dependent on this guy. I'm not even an individual myself. So he gets a kind of a realization of individuation in that process too, Ricardo.
I would say, how do you see on that relationship the fact that in so many cases it was the people themselves who helped the process of their own enslavement? Because you're talking about liberation, but what we see is the opposite.
I refer, whenever I look at a dynamic like that, there's an overt pair, right? There's two. So I kind of find that don't make sense. There's got to be more than that. And to your point, I think there's the worldly and the worldlings. The worldlings would choose slavery over anything, right? Because, and it's kind of the same idea with these cultish mindset, where they would rather not consider their own death than anything. right? They're really like, they have an obsession with maybe even hurting others, but themselves getting hurt, no, 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 no. Or themselves looking at their own shadow, no, no. So the worldly understand that the powers that be are not necessarily so wealthy that they can be kind. Like that, remark that, or remember the Lord Acton idea with the a lot of supporters of the current political establishment remark about that they're so wealthy they must be doing us a favor. They're literally saying that, hey, this guy could be doing anything, anywhere. He has so much money. Why don't you just thank him for helping us? Wait, but the Lord Acton rule says that we should not trust people with high privilege and high power, even if they're not in office. So I'm just using that as a dynamic to how far we've changed to where now we say commonly that rich people, we should thank them because they could be doing other things as their office, not that we should be like questioning their mode of operation. So I think there's the other two pair are the worldly and the worldling. And the worldlings really would love to be under the thumb of institution as long as they're safe, right? The idea in the United States was, give me liberty or safety. Well, certainly, yes, absolutely. They want to be under the wing of something with that illusion. Not that they'll be any more safe than anyone else or any less safe necessarily, but you either can get liberty or safety, and they choose safety. Speaking broadly, I don't mean to be so political in that.
It's true. I just wanted to put in there that I think people need institutions in a lot of ways, because every time you see humans turning to society, they have to have an institution that they can look up to, that they feel has their back.
And they're not overtly bad, right? The institutions are not necessarily bad. Yeah.
But that institutionalized mindset is so important for a lot of people's mental health. Yeah. I don't, having the idea there. Well, that's the thing. It's like, how do you bring the love back between the institution and the individual? I'm open to suggestions. I mean, there's got to be better practical applications.
I feel like the United States tried in its original design, with the Bill of Rights having importance. But I mean, even going back 10 years, we have the Citizens United law, right? And we can keep going back and finding removal of individual rights and expansion of institutional ability, right? Where it should be the other way around, because institutions, they don't even require water. They can do whatever the hell they want. well, people that make up these
in a well-organized society, you think that you require less and less institutional control as the population evolve and betters itself.
Except the opposite occurs.
Yeah. And my question to you is, we have, 6 billion people on the planet or something like that, right? How many of these 6 billion are individuals?
Presumably all of them.
Well, I would say my first answer would be all of them, but I wonder, because the Hopi have the expression of the two-hearted individual, and if we look at that phrase in the idea of institutions and individuals, it's like individuals living for an institution. That's the type of person you want to look out for, right? That they have a whole other heart to feed. And they have a whole other agenda, and it's actually written by a machinist, institutionalist.
Yeah,
and they're living a whole other heart.
My point was, as long as someone adopts an ideology, be it political, religious, whatever, it ceases to be an individual.
That's what I was just saying by way of the two-hearted idea.
Yeah,
that they are an individual, but with a second heart to feed.
Exactly.
And therefore, it's this art is always hungry, as the Hopi put it.
It's a tricky thing, because again, if imagine that in 20, 30 years something really happens because of the geomagnetic event going on. If it comes to a point where the institutions will have to secure a specific number of individuals under their umbrella that they can sustain and maintain at least until the convulsions ends, what will happen then? Because people will not want to fend for themselves. So you again, there's this rift. There is no connection between those that are trying to expand consciousness to the other side, while the other side is only worried on survival and maintaining what they have. They don't want evolution or devolution. They want what they have. That's what they want. Even if they think about it, I think it's not a conscious thing, because how many people are their work, right? Most people are their work. They are not who they are. They don't know who they are. All they know is their character on the situations that they face during their experience, but they never seated with themselves and thought, who am I? They just know by the way that they react, as any other person that knows them throughout their lives, what's their character. But they don't sit and think, who am I? Not the common worker of the factory or the lots of people don't. In fact, we talked about this before. There's a huge amount of people that only have silence in their heads, which to me was the few things that can possibly shock me. It's silence in their heads. There is no conversation. There is no dialogue. There's nothing. How do you reach such a point where you eliminate so much of yourself that you're just reacting to your calendar, to your schedule, right? There's nothing. It's very weird to me.
That's no inner dialogue. That's just definitely struck me as very weird.
I never conjured it before until I heard it. It's particularly common that people have absolute silence. As long as they are not in a conversation, there is nothing going on up there.
I envy those people.
No, you don't.
Yeah, there's a fine line. I guess we just got to balance if we are or aren't. But to be always chatter, that's difficult. But always silent, I can't imagine that either.
So Alexander the Great was asked. He was asked, if you could be anybody else, who would you be? And he chose Diogenes the Cynic. It was a homeless dude who sat around naked inside of a barrel with a bunch of dogs from town.
Yeah,
that's a wise answer.
Well, he said that because Diogenes was always in other people's faces telling them how much of a big hypocrite they were.
There was a story about someone who met Diogenes. Was it not Alexander?
Plato. So Plato asked, he wanted to get a definition in as few words as possible. And so he would ask people, what is a man? And one of them said, what was it? Yeah. It was a featherless biped. And so Diogenes had a chicken that he plucked all the feathers out, and he goes, behold, a man.
Poor chicken.
No, there's another story of someone seeking him out to meet him because he's the greatest mind of the era. And he goes to meet him, and he's hanging out in his barrel, and he says, hey, I want to say it was Alexander. I forget as the story goes. So I apologize. But he says, hey, I'm here to meet you. Okay. There's a legend about Diogenes meeting Alexander. Bumclat says it dope. And he just asked him to get out of his way of the light. Asked him to move out of the sun. That's just,
you're in my sunlight. That's
you're in my way. I don't. Who are you?
Yeah, one of my favorite characters.
That's how we should treat institutions and institutional representatives. And I say this as, I guess I'm an American, but I feel like it's rebellious to say this now, right? Like people are so like, why don't you just like Elon Musk for being involved in the government? He's the wealthiest man on the planet. He could be doing anything. Why don't you just thank him? Oh, well, because I read Lord Acton. Like,
Right.
I mean, to start with, I mean, and I don't just trust wealthy people. So it's just a weird shift of mindset. And it's very worldling, right, Ricardo, who support these institutional people that are like how wealthy is Elon? We can't even relate, you know?
Yeah, but
It's the phenomenon of being a fan of something. No, it
Yeah.
is. To me,
Well,
it's a
well,
phenomenon. I never
no,
experienced that all my life.
well, I laugh because of the phenomenology of spirit or the phenomenology of fanhood.
Yeah, exactly. So I never understood it because I might like someone's work, but to be a fan that comes from fanatic, right? That's the origin of the word. Just made a little bit prettier. And this, remember the Beatles? People would rip off their hairs and do crazy stuff because they were in front of those people. I never understood that. They're just people, right? They're just people. They have nice songs and all, but they're just people. And I see this devotion that is used to influence all these generations behind us, and will continue to be used to govern generations ahead. That they use these people that they know that create these fans to mold how they think, how they dress, how they behave, what they consume, all of that stuff. So it ends all as a mechanism of control, making a circle to the conversation. It all is used. It's nothing for the benefit of the population. It's just for the benefit of control, I think.
I think you're onto something. I think it all comes back to turning away from the theater. The theater is the first church. And I think this is where you get the idea of the theology. You know, it's Thea, the goddess, and Logos, which means reason. Thea is a Titanides, right? So she's one of the Titans, one of the levels up from the Olympians. And she's married to Hyperion, the god of the East. It's like further east than the East. And her powers and what she brought to the world was she gave intrinsic value to gemstones and metals. And so Thea, this idea of Thea, the gods, sort of the flesh of gold, right? That's the people who gave value to things here. And theology would be the reason why it's giving value to certain things. It's all about keeping your attention. Your eyes are what gives intrinsic value to things. And the whole purpose of having a religion that, you know, takes you away from where you should be and what you should be looking at has to do with the theology of, you know, using your value, using your attention.
Yeah, but that is being reduced because when I through my how should I call it, my teenage years, you have so many different groups of people. You have the punks, you have the rock and roll, you have the metal guys, you have the grunge, whatever. I'm just giving example of music. Every single one of them dressed differently, hair was different. They all mingled. There is no rivalry because we enjoyed different stuff. And what I've seen is the choices, even the choices that people had to follow, are being reduced and reduced and reduced, and it's almost fused into one single choice right now. There is what is either pop music, if that's what it's called, and rap, or that kind of stuff. So in cinema, in arts, everything is being reduced. Everything, the choice, the variety, the context. So so there is this movie called Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead. You could not make an audience watch 5 minutes of that movie today.
I've seen it. I know what you mean.
You know what I mean, right? You couldn't make it a watch because it's too insane. It's just, and it's brilliant. It's brilliantly written, brilliantly acted. It's a great story, and it is because these are two actors These two characters, the Guildenstern and Rosencrantz, are two actors from Macbeth that don't have a scene. They are just mentioned, right? And this guy decided to make a whole movie because they are mentioned as dead. And the whole movie is them not understanding that they're dead and continue with the play. So these two insignificant creatures put in high places of high importance where they have no importance whatsoever because they don't exist. They don't belong there. So it's a amazing movie. The problem is you wouldn't be able because it's too much. It's not in your face. You have to question what the hell is going on here, right? So, and people don't like that anymore. It's being reduced. Once I've seen that now we are making. Do you remember in the 80s, 90s where we make jokes when movies got to the 3 or the 4? Now you have movies going to the 10s and the 11s. That idiotic thing of the cars. What it's called? With the racing cars, the tuning called. What it's called, the movie. They had 10 movies or 11 or 12 with Dwayne Johnson and
Fast and the Furious.
Fast and the Furious. So that even destroyed the passion for cars because nothing of that is real. Absolutely nothing is real there. They have chassis. It's the only thing on the road is chassis that digitally can be any car. So it's just a stunt driver driving a chassis that is nothing. There's no panels on the car, nothing. It's just a chassis with a wheel and a steering and a seating, and then they digitally create everything that they want and put it on the movie. And people are following this and trying to replicate what they see in the movies, right? They don't even understand that that's a movie, right? That it's beyond. I'm sorry I'm ranting here, but my point is, I think that people are allowing themselves to be reduced even further than they were a decade or 2 or 3 decades ago. So
do you think that's why everything got ugly? Like you've noticed, everything in our society is just getting uglier and uglier. Like the things they build, art, all of it.
Art has no meaning anymore. No meaning. It's abstract. You've seen this painting that was sold by I don't know the numbers, but it was $1 million or $1.5 million, right? And it was just an idiotic image that could have been drawn by children, or you have of those stamps that you buy to children for them to play. That's the image. It's a heart, a string, and a kid with a triangular dress holding a balloon. Okay.
Triangular dress.
Yeah, that's the drawing. Okay. And so the guy bought the guy buy the painting, and it is as the instructions of the creator of the painting, and it's already incorporated in the frame that once it's bought, it would come out of the painting and would fall into it has a machine that cuts in stripes, cuts the paper.
The paper shredder. Yeah.
Right. So half of the painting was done like that. So you only see half of the painting above the frame, and you have the stripes of the rest of the painting. It was immediately sold for more $20 million than it was bought. And what the heck is going on? How is that any worth to anybody?
I put it this way. So you've got dominance, and dominance leads to decadence. Right? So in your society, when you're dominant over the world, you're going to lead that into decadence. That decadence is going to lead you into degeneracy, and that degeneracy is then going to lead to your destruction.
Well, I keep remembering the words of the architect. There is, no, we build the perfect matrix. Everyone had everything they wanted. They could do whatever they wanted. All their needs were kept. So nothing. They could be whatever they wanted. It didn't work because it only works when they have the illusion of having that choice. To have the actual choice doesn't work because people don't know what to do with it. And the illusion is something that you will never do. So you can plan a lot of things. You can desire a lot of things, but that's just how they will remain all your life. So I think that defines pretty much our society. People don't want to be free or have choice or freedom. They want something that they can feel secure, or that no matter that all the money that they make during their month is immediately spent afterwards to actually live the life that they're living, that doesn't allow them to live. Sorry if this is getting complicated, but
Well, I think there is a possibility that other institutions can rise up in the place of the ones that are failing for a cheaper rate. So if at a certain point everything breaks down in your society to the level that nothing functions at all, there becomes a big opportunity for somebody else to step in at that point, and having that ability to step in at the right time could make all the difference in the coming collapse.
yeah, but if you are able to create that and take advantage of that opportunity because you have previous information of what's going on, then you're part of the system, most likely. And just creating a new system that
We're
allows
talking
people
about it
to
now.
rebel.
Well, I mean, it hasn't happened yet. So I think getting people interested in the idea that maybe there are ways of planning this stuff back into existence provides you a level of influence that you wouldn't normally have.
Look, you have been here for 20 years or more. There are some foreign people that came here to a place called Alentejo, and they buy big pieces of land to Portugal, of course, like 300 hectares or 1,000 acres of land. And they start bringing people, and they start building houses, and they start producing materials, and they start trading those materials, and they are completely independent societies within the country. But suddenly it transformed itself from being something that was a beautiful plan into the greed of those that want to belong to such community. So it ceased to be something that was free, and it's now like a pyramid scheme. So everything gets corrupted.
Well, I think everything in society is a pyramid scheme. Really, when it comes down to the very basis for society existing in the first place, it's practically a pyramid scheme. I mean, they had plenty in the wilderness, and they lived in harmony with nature for the most part until everybody was packed onto these tiny little farms to collect wheat, 2 times out of the year. It wasn't very efficient at all, but there was alcohol so people could get drunk.
And then they use the Colosseum too.
I would
It's
say
always been a
that
pyramid scheme.
they all are pyramid schemes. Some are a lot steeper than others.
It's true.
You look at places like Angkor Wat, and you see it's huge, but it's very small because the buildings are not that big on the inside. It's a big structure, but every single building is not massive in itself. So
I think we've just discovered the meaning of the pyramids. It's always been a pyramid scheme. They've been yelling it at us this whole time.
it's our symbol. It's our symbol. Here it is. And it has no top because the top is hidden.
Right? Not allowed to know about that. That's our other symbol. We don't talk about that one.
I completely forgot what I was saying.
I don't know.
Angkor what?
Oh, you see that. So what that means is the people that lived in the palace, or were the rulers, or the elite, was a very small group compared to the millions that had to work the fields, right? And they had the millions because they needed all of those people to work the fields, but then the fields would have to serve to feed the people. So even them fall onto these cycles that then what we do with the people. And all of a sudden we hear of these civilizations that grew, flourished, became immense, and then disappeared. So
Right.
Imagine that elite said, okay, we want to recycle this, we don't need you anymore, so please go into that line, where's that guillotine, please, and we'll take care of you. So,
I have a perfect example of that. So during the 5 sacred wars that Alexander the Great's father fought, Philip II, they had this one group of people that kept on kidnapping and raping, robbing, and murdering people by the Oracle at Delphi. And this group was so hated that they formed this league of these different tribes coming together to go, kill these bastards who were fucking with the Oracle, right? And in one of these campaigns, the league decided to salt the fields of this one other place where they kept on robbing and murdering and capturing the Oracle at Delphi. That was supposed to keep them off of there forever, but then people just moved right back in and started growing different things instead of having the other ones. And so that pissed off the league again. And so they took Delphi, and then Philip II dressed all of his fighters up with a wreath in honor of Apollo, and then they ran the entire forces into the sea. So it was like this big victory for Philip. But then he realized that this group was actually a proxy army for Athens. And so he had to blockade Athens and end democracy in Athens forever at that point forward. So he was, basically the victor. And this is why you have Alexander the Great later on, is through these holy wars, he was given the powers of Apollo. So there are instances where, you have the will of the people and the will of the gods sort of matching up to have great things happen. Maybe we're close to a point in time like that again. I mean, we have all of this knowledge, all of this information. Why couldn't there be a breakthrough in our favor? I think technology is wide open right now. All people have to do is step in and fill the gap.
Yeah, but you live in a world where for a single DNA test, they ask you for $1.5 million. That's what's stopping most of the actual alternative researchers that have some conditions to do the testing, but it's virtually impossible because they set the bar so goddamn high in terms of price that it's veiled to a small group or a singular person trying to make some testing. It's just absurd.
It's going to have to take more networking. You're going to have to get 3 or 4 groups operating in simultaneously in different counties. And then what they're working on, let's say agricultural advancements and these other things, can then fund the rest of the research going on in different places. But I'm saying, like, there's a lot of potential there if you could start to industrially apply the sort of knowledge about, 0-point energy, all the rest of this stuff, into a very practical level, because the materials used to build this stuff is not that expensive. And if you can cut down on fuel costs for people for, half of what they're spending now, that would ease up so much capital that you'll actually start to see development again. Going county by county is it could spur that fucking revolution on. That's what you want to see. People have to get excited about this stuff. They have to think about this in terms of winning and losing. Do you want to win or do you want to lose? You stick with these old people, all of this crap with the government, you're going to lose. So you get involved as soon as possible with the idea of security and these other factors, because they're not taking care of us.
But I see only one possibility of that being done, and it cannot be one or multiple institutions because the state would not allow it. I think the only way to do it is by a religion, is to create a religion where everyone is free and owns himself. But instead of calling it ideology or a way of politics, it has to be considered as a religion, because they cannot touch religion, because otherwise theirs could be touched too. So,
hell yeah, dude, let's start a religion. I'm down. I think we just laid out all the theological principles, because they're all spiritual principles too. I mean, what are we talking about? These things aren't separate.
No, not at all. So what's the name?
I don't know. I'll come up with something. This has been a great episode, but I got to get something to eat. We got to come back and do another one pretty soon.
Sure, absolutely. I enjoyed it pretty much. Yes. I just want to say that one of the people wrote down there that he had a concussion. She, as I presume, had a concussion, and for 2 weeks he had nothing up there after the concussion, which I also find intriguing.
I've tried to get him on the show before, but
you did?
Yeah, he's shy. So maybe I'll keep working on him. He's got a lot of interesting stories too. I mean, just there's a lot of stuff there. But anyways, let me. What am I doing? All right, I got to take everybody down.